Welcome to the international release of the trilogy documentary feature The End of Nations. We've decided to make this film for one reason. Understanding American politics is crucial for understanding the very world we live in. The US is known as the forefront of Western civilization. However, its foundations are under attack by enemies from inside and outside the country, visible and invisible ones. For a long time, the American presidential elections have been influencing the future of the world, and given the current state of affairs, this one in 2020 can have an even larger impact. Every day, we're bombarded with superficial debates and biased political analysis by the mainstream media. This makes it harder for us to see the big picture. And if one may ask the importance of taking the time to understand the current situation, the answer is simple. Because to be outside of this debate means to walk away from the cultural war. Let's make it clear. This trilogy is not about the election itself, nor it is about political candidates. It is instead a collection of facts and events that portray what America once was, what it has become, and where it's heading towards. In episode 1, we'll question whether we're approaching the end of an era in which the US is the leading economic and cultural superpower, and we'll also outline the importance of American politics to the rest of the world. Episode 2 will show events and players that contributed to the weakening of one of humanity's most successful enterprises of freedom and how this happened. Finally, episode 3 will show what makes this an inevitable discussion. What is the matter of the dispute between Russia, China, and the US? And also, what is the risk of having a new Cold War? When it comes to the United States of America, local politics is international politics. We are Brasil Paralelo, a private film studio based in Brazil. We began our journey in 2016 and have since then released over 30 documentaries that have been watched by more than 20 million people. Our productions have helped shape the way Brazilians understand economics, politics, and history. We strive to restore the good ideas, values, and feelings in the hearts and minds of people. Our achievements are made possible through the voluntary contributions of our monthly subscribers, who we call members. There are now more than 120,000 people. That is why we take no government subsidy, and the contributions we receive are not tax deductible. Our members place their trust in us, and we pay them back by releasing the best possible content we can. And if you want more information about our work, please check out the presentation in the description of the video. This trilogy is our first international release. It is our first effort to be at the forefront of the battle of ideas. So please stay with episode 1 of The End of Nations.
September 11, 2001. United Airlines Flight 93 was hijacked by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. That morning, 3 planes had already reached the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. When news of the attack reached the passengers, they realized they had embarked on a suicide flight. It is not known what the plane's target was, but they were heading towards the center of American power, the Capitol and the White House. The passengers found themselves in a terrifying situation. If they choose to take action, they would have very low chance of survival, but if they didn't do anything, they would have no chance at all. After a quick show of hands, they attacked the hijackers. And that is how Flight 93 went into history as an occasion for heroism, becoming the symbol of desperate last-chance situations in which the choice to do nothing can be fatal.
as close to a cultural civil war.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Largely peaceful demonstrations, largely peaceful demonstrations, largely peaceful demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations.
China has surpassed the United States as the largest economy in the world.
The Oscar goes to Parasite.
It's not can you trust Huawei, it's can you trust the Chinese government.
France winning 89-79 over the USA.
The age of American exceptionalism is coming to an end.
In 2016, the United States was like a middle-aged man who, after decades ignoring life's problems, was finally forced to look in the mirror. And the image he saw there was disturbing. It was the image of a nation threatening to collapse not by its failures, but ironically, by its success. In times of crises, we usually ask ourselves if the journey is finally coming to an end. For the United States, the journey had a literal meaning. Devout settlers fleeing from religious persecution crossed the Atlantic, facing the unknown to sow the seed of a new world. The United States became a byword for independence and conquest. From isolated giant, they turned into the global superpower regarded by all as the free world. Its currency became a symbol of trust, and its cultural icons conquered the hearts and minds of the whole world. For generations, the country seemed to fulfill the destiny that the first group of settlers heard in a sermon before leaving for America.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
They shared his vision for America as a shining city upon a hill.
Shining city upon a hill.
The shining city upon a hill. Seen by the whole world, it was to be the destiny of the United States. It was a journey of remarkable successes and bitter disappointments. Euphoria and optimism slowly gave way to the feeling of guilt and mistrust.
At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time, or die by suicide.
The words of Lincoln were prophetic. Amidst internal chaos and external challenges, the United States suffers the biggest identity crisis of all its history, and sees before it the harrowing possibility that the long American century may be coming to an end. Throughout history, nations have resorted to two ways of dealing with their biggest crises: war and voting. The United States knows both options well. Being founded on an armed revolution and devotion to the Constitution and its republic. From the Confederate states that voted to secede from the Union, to the passengers of Flight 93 that voted to stop the terrorists. Democracy has always played a part in the most important moments of the American people. When the population goes to the ballots to vote for a president, this impacts the future of their own country. In the case of the American elections,
Das Rennen zwischen Trump und
Clinton, опережает Trump.
They impact the future of the whole world.
Досрочное голосование.
Elecciones presidenciales.
É o dilema do mundo.
The election of the President of the United States means a lot of different things. collapsing.
The American financial system is rocked to its
wealth, wars, peace.
Talking about genuine peace.
No wonder the whole world stops to watch it.
A new Emerson College survey shows the race tightening, with just over 60 days to the election.
2020 is no different.
Finally, that shrewdest of all observers of American democracy, Alexis de Tocqueville, put it eloquently after he had gone on a search for the secret of America's greatness and genius. And he said, "Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and the genius of America. America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great."
The United States is a contemporary reference for democracy, law, stability, prosperity, and innovation. Being at the forefront of the world has a price. Everyone wants your place. But the ascension of the other countries doesn't seem to threaten the United States more than its own implosion. The last few decades have been marked by deep economic crises, loss of self-confidence and patriotism, and a drop in educational performance, and a decrease in global influence. For all who think about international politics, this is the question to ask. Is the American imminent downfall cause or symptom of the times we live in?
There's no next election. This is it. There's no more time for us left to revive our great country.
The country's falling apart, and that's just not spiritually or psychically. I mean, we're living on credit again.
That's like a cancer on our country. We may have lost our last chance to actually save the country from long-term fiscal chaos.
It's not just in race, it's in everything. You know, gender, age, income, religion, you name it. We're driving wedges in between people in our society.
Pessimists will tell you basically that America's broke. It's broke socially, it's broke politically, it's divided against itself, the politics don't work, the Constitution prevents people taking decisions.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to free its people and to defend the world from grave danger.
The United States is involved in 7 different wars. In Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, and Nigeria. This military presence may be justified, but it has hurt America's worldwide reputation. Campaigns promising peace led to vague and unsatisfactory wars that seem to bring even more instability.
عائلتي يعني أكثر من 14 15 شخص معدوم. كنت فرحان بشكل يعني دخلوا الأمريكان وخلصونا من نظام صدام البائي. قتل صدام بس يعني ما شفنا من مثل هاي الحكومة. راح صدام وجانا أهل صدام.
By overthrowing Saddam Hussein, the United States transformed Iraq into a territory ravaged by bloody disputes, creating the conditions for the emergence of ISIS.
بالله عليكم لو أن أحد الدول الكافرة أو النصارى أرادوا أن يقيموا كنيسة ويتعبدوا فيها ديانتهم الباطلة الفاجرة، هل كان أحد يردهم عن ذلك؟ لابد نحن المسلمين، نحن الذين نريد أن نقيم شرع الله في هذه.
Even with this questionable performance, the budget of the Department of Defense has already exceeded $500 billion a year. American military has to be one of the strongest in the world.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process.
The relationship between the armed forces and the U.S. Congress and the conglomerate of companies that sell military-grade weapons has been called the Iron Triangle. At one point, arms manufacturing companies from SIG, special interest groups, financed political campaigns. Financed by these companies, politicians declare wars and approve budgets for the Department of Defense, which signs more billion-dollar contracts with these same companies and receives more weapons for more wars. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Raytheon depend on such contracts to survive, having up to 85% of their profits coming from the sale of weapons to the U.S. government. Most of these wars mean nothing to the public. This creates an overall feeling that the government no longer has the interests of its people at heart. This only intensifies America's instability, while citizens suffer from closer and more pressing problems.
The power of even the smallest touch of fentanyl shown in this video. Watch as a Bartlesville police officer wearing protective gloves is packing up drug evidence believed to be laced with fentanyl when he slowly starts to collapse.
Becoming ill, lightheaded, and actually basically passed out or fell.
Seconds later, a rush of officers coming to the rescue.
I don't know what would have happened had they not acted so quickly.
Another layer to the opioid epidemic and an eye-opening to what these men and women behind the badge have to deal with.
A drug so powerful that doctors and police have to wear protective equipment for its handling. That's fentanyl. The drug at the root of the most severe health crisis the United States ever faced. In the 1990s, the pharmaceutical industry began to aggressively advertise opioids such as oxycodone, minimizing their high risk of addiction.
These drugs, which I repeat are our best, strongest pain medications, should be used much more than they are for patients in pain.
1 in 8 children in the United States has a parent who suffers from opioid addiction. More than 140 Americans die from overdose every day.
Drug overdoses now take more lives every year than traffic accidents. Deaths from opioid overdoses have tripled since 2000.
There is no other medication that kills so many people as opioids. There is no other medication which, within a week, can condemn someone to a life of addiction.
In 2013, opioids were already a national health problem, and access to this type of medication became restricted. Drug dependents started looking for illegal drugs. They began to use heroin, creating an even bigger problem. That's when fentanyl became a problem, a cheaper synthetic opioid and 100 times more potent than morphine, which changed a public health crisis into an epidemic. Only in 2016, 68,000 Americans died of overdose. The problem is so big that campaigns encouraging people to carry drugs that stop overdoses became more common every day. The nightmare doesn't show signs to end soon. There are already cases of overdoses caused by the use of elephant tranquilizers. Many young Americans look with resentment and frustration to the past. They remember that their parents at the same age had already started their families, bought their houses and cars, and still saved for a comfortable retirement. Nowadays, most young Americans already start their adult life burdened with a $30,000 to $100,000 debt. This debt is contracted to fund their studies in college. But real life no longer guarantees a safe job at the end of the course. In 1970, about 1% of taxi drivers had a college degree. In 2016, this number exceeded 15%. Half the graduates work in professions that do not require higher education, such as cashiers, waiters, and sales. Meanwhile, the student loan debt already exceeds $1 trillion. The portrait of a culture that attaches the idea of prestige and success to university education.
All right, here we go. For each correct answer, we'll pay you a percentage of your debt. If you get 8 correct, we'll pay you the whole amount.
Okay. After I graduate, I'll have $35,000 in debt.
Currently, I have $65,000 of student debt, and I'll graduate with close to $100,000 of student debt.
Well, people are horrified about the possibility of not landing a job, not landing an internship, because if you don't land on your feet coming right out of it, what do you do?
It's taken us almost 250 years to build this country. We could wreck it in a single generation. And at this rate, we will. Is that our current system is making young people poorer. Go to college, we tell them. You'll be successful if you do. But too often that advice is outdated, if not an utter lie. Huge numbers of our kids wind up impoverished by the experience of college, their dreams thwarted forever. And the reason for that is debt. 45 million Americans now labor under student loans. The average debt burden is $37,000 per person. So no wonder young people aren't getting married or buying homes or having children. They can't afford to. They can't afford to.
For the first time in the modern era, the number of Americans between 18 and 34 years living with their parents surpassed the number of Americans living with a spouse. As married life dwindles, more young Americans start selling erotic photos and videos on the internet, capitalizing their bodies on subscription services. Unprepared and crushed by the ever higher cost of living, young Americans have been employing survival strategies that seem more fitting to third world countries.
What is not recovering in this economy is wages.
A majority of U.S. workers have experienced a decade of flat wages, according to new research by the left-leaning Economic Policy Institute. It found the median weekly wage last year was $768. That's the same as 12 years earlier when adjusted for inflation. Over that same period, wages fell for 70% of workers. Economists place much of the blame on a labor market that hasn't recovered from the Great Recession.
The American economy impresses on those who look at its numbers the idea of stability and continued prosperity. When we look at the GDP, the United States is still the biggest economy in the world. It is common to forget that small individual decisions create broad economic indices. And it is here that we begin to see reasons to worry. The tendency to favor risky financial operations was evident during the dot-com bubble in 2001 and the subprime crisis in 2008. Such operations didn't take long to result in unemployment, debt, and bankruptcies. And they dragged the American economy into the most severe economic recession since the Great Depression of '29, causing millions of people to lose their savings, jobs, and homes.
Those protests against Wall Street continue to grow across the country today. Here in New York, thousands of demonstrators descended on the financial district.
Occupy Wall Street was a social movement against income inequality, corporate greed, and the influence of big business in politics.
In the last 4 months of 2008, the country lost more than 2.6 million jobs. Instead of facing the crisis, the United States swept it under the rug and raised the stakes.
After they did the dot-com bubble, and that burst, and they reinflated it with the real estate and credit crisis bubble, and then when that burst, now they've created the bubble of all bubbles. And it's not only the United States, this is a global bubble. They're all into it. It's called the bailout bubble. Hey, the economy's going down, recession's setting in, sales don't look good, exports soft, need more money? How about we'll call it stimulus package, stimulus package.
Economic indices tell only part of the story, leaving aside the infrastructure problems that are beginning to hamper the country's recovery.
America's infrastructure gets a near failing grade. The American Society of Civil Engineers assigned our nation's roads, bridges, levees, and other infrastructures a grade of D+. That's the same grade as 4 years ago.
An inefficient and outdated infrastructure acts as an anchor, preventing economic progress and causing waste. To face problems like bridges falling, 16,000 dams at risk, 48 American states with the electrical grid at maximum capacity, roads with below-average ratings, and obsolete airports over 40 years old, the government needs to issue more bonds, further increasing public debt. In 2016, that debt already reached $19 trillion. As the debt goes up, more taxes are used to pay interest. In 2016, the budget deficit was already up to $587 billion. There was an increasing mismatch between the workers' production, which went up, and wages, which remained stagnant. A quarter of the American productive force already worked below the poverty line, receiving less than $10 an hour. Since the 1980s, middle-class wages have stagnated, and lower-class wages have plummeted.
Politicians on both sides of the aisle talk about supporting the middle class, but in the U.S., that group is shrinking. Pew Research Center data shows that in 1971, 61% of adults lived in middle-income households. By 2016, that number was down to 52%. So what income bracket were those people absorbed into? Before 2000, people leaving the middle class were more likely to join the upper class. But after 2000, the opposite was true. People were more likely to drop to the lower income group.
78% of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck, without enough money to save or pay for health, education, and housing services. To help people make ends meet, the government offers more and more subsidization and loans. In 2016, the United States' total personal debt was up to $12.6 trillion. The United States is no longer a predominantly middle-class nation. This increasingly widens the gap between the wealthiest top and the poorest base. With many households unable to pay their bills, economic inequality quickly becomes a political agenda.
My plan actually gives the middle class the greatest break.
I think everybody in America who works for a living understands that the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the world, is disappearing.
Commercial agreements like KORUS and NAFTA are accused of worsening the problem and causing the extinction of more than 700,000 jobs.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations and create 200,000 jobs in this country.
Buying more from China than China buys from the United States, crescent trade deficits are accused of eliminating more than 3 million jobs.
I thought she was asking me, could Hillary Clinton ever support a trade deal? Well, of course she could, if it meets her criteria. It doesn't meet her criteria. She is against TPP. She's not going to change her mind on that.
The worst month of job losses in 5 years could be an alarming turning point for the economy.
So we see things like student debt impacts people's ability to buy a house. People with student loan debt actually make less over the course of their lives. They can't go into the careers they want.
At least 91 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose. Drug overdoses now kill more people than guns or car accidents.
4,488 soldiers died in the Iraq War.
This scenario affects many young Americans who enter adult life with no hope in the future. In 2008, appealing to all these concerns and yearnings, hope came with a new name for the American people.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
could make history by becoming the first African-American president of the United States.
I still believe in hope. Change has come to America.
A disappointed population. A worn-out political dynasty.
Corporations are people, my friend.
And a relatively unknown young man who promised to renew politics. The message was clear. Barack Hussein Obama seemed to represent in his skin color the words hope.
Cynicism is a choice, and hope is a better choice. I still believe in hope.
Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. The audacity of hope.
And change.
That the ways of Washington must change.
We have to change our politics.
Change is always possible. We can create the change that we seek.
His campaign themes were risky, but increasingly popular. Promote new rights for gays, combat racism, take care of the environment, stop the wars, and take care of the poorest. Barack Obama became an overwhelming media phenomenon, the pop star politician that America had not seen since John Kennedy.
When he just changed all the rules on the table.
When I was at the UN and I heard our president say that climate change is the most important issue.
The result could not be otherwise.
It was absolutely breathtaking.
There's no one as Irish as Barack Obama. You don't believe me, I hear you say. But Barack's as Irish as was JFK. His granddaddy's daddy came from Monaco, a small Irish village well known to you all.
There were a lot of tears and there were a lot of smiles.
But I know a change done come.
Change has come to America.
The election of Barack Obama was a historical event, which confirmed the promise of the United States as a land of opportunity. It was the ultimate overcoming of slavery and racial segregation. Barack Obama won 2 elections. If the first one was a real cultural event,
and a lot of hopes and dreams of so many Americans.
Katie, this is more than an election night in America. This is a momentous night in the history of our country.
where he received the highest number of votes in United States history, the second was more modest.
The crowds were smaller than 4 years ago. Now, the crowd, as you mentioned, was about 800,000. That's half the size, in fact, less than half of what we had 4 years ago.
The promised change didn't occur, and the United States trudged on with issues which were tedious and bureaucratic to the ordinary citizen. The Great Recession, federal budgeting, special security programs, and changes in the health system. The euphoria gave way to a hangover, and real-world politics reasserted itself. The young, charismatic politician was more of a system politician. It didn't take long for the disappointment to accumulate. One of the most important points of Obama's campaign was the removal of troops from Iraq and handling the Middle East more intelligently. But already in the first week of his administration, Obama authorized a drone attack which had innocent victims. And 2010 ended up being the bloodiest year of the Pakistan conflict.
It is not true that it has been this sort of willy-nilly, let's bomb a village.
There were 10 times more drone attacks than in George Bush's administration. The removal of troops happened in 2011, but 3 years later, a new deployment of troops was made.
President Obama is putting U.S. forces on the ground in Syria, something he had vowed not to do.
Barack Obama left the presidency in 2016, and the United States remained as entangled in the Middle East conflict as before. His government damaged the image that the Democrats sold and showed that human rights could be negotiated. His administration bailed out banks involved in the financial crisis,
Is that we all hated the bank bailout.
protected executives involved in fraud scandals,
We had a wonderful meeting today with the president. The basic message is we're all in this thing together.
deported more than 2 million illegal immigrants, increased the American debt by over $700 billion, and failed to implement a public health system.
more than $1 billion wasted and $1 billion more owed.
What we found out is that a lot of bad decisions were made.
Yes, I think it is fair to say that when it comes to my presidency, the honeymoon is over.
The honeymoon was over, but there was little doubt that the next election would elect Obama's successor.
It is my honor to present to you the next president of the United States of America, Senator Bernie Sanders.
The party represented all the mainstream agendas of popular culture.
Stand with the women and demand pay equity for women workers.
Just like the Democrats used the race card before, now they would use another card which they thought infallible. The first female president of the United States.
Tonight, we've reached a milestone in our nation's march toward a more perfect union. The first time that a major party has nominated a woman for president.
Any other possibility would be unthinkable.
You're fired. Get out of here.
Donald Trump, just last week, he confirmed to the National Review that he is again considering a run in 2016.
Do it. Do it. Look at me. Do it.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
And how could anyone in my party think that this clown is fit to be president?
And this rodeo clown.
And I'm watching a clown show.
I don't know if you guys speak Spanish, but I want you to remember this one word, payaso. Payaso.
I was just saying that really a second ago.
It means clown.
Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump.
We're huge for all the candidates. Really? This many candidates still?
There's too many damn people on that goddamn stage.
Then false choices like the one the president laid out tonight.
The choices. Secretary Clinton supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade agreements written by corporate America.
Jab, jab, jab.
Ayúdenos en tener una campaña.
This is a country where we speak English.
It's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you.
Biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar.
I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry.
Is there a Muslim problem in the world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't notice Swedish people knocking down the World Trade Center.
But what we heard in Cleveland last week wasn't particularly Republican.
Not a person had a clue who I was.
I knew.
Yeah.
They told me right before you walked on.
Exactly. First of all, you know,
Patience.
Don't you want to see more women?
More patience.
This guy will say anything. Nasty guy.
A woman.
Are we not way above that?
Mr. Trump.
I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there.
If you are talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy,
You know,
excuse me, I'm talking.
This is important, guys.
Don't you want to see more women?
You have not been willing to attack Mr. Trump in public, but you did
You better
question
not
his
attack.
judgment.
This is a tough business to run for
I know
president.
you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have.
Don't you want to see more women?
well, first of all, let me just complain a little bit.
What is your plan?
It's Rubio!
My campaign is suspended.
So tonight, I am suspending my campaign.
We are suspending our campaign.
And as I suspend my campaign today,
I'm still here.
I like Ben, but he cannot do with trade like I do with.
Now that I am leaving the campaign trail,
She will be the next president of the United States.
yeah.
John, it's not Jeb. John, it's not Jeb.
What?
I'm going to tell you who the candidate is.
But before you tell me, though, I'm a little parched, if I may.
Oh, you want to take a little tea in your mouth before you? Okay.
Just to wet the whistle. I humbly and gratefully
accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
It's Donald Trump. What? Yeah.
In 2016, a pundit wrote an essay which made waves in the conservative enclaves on the internet. In this essay, he compared the new elections to the United Airlines Flight 93. The essay confirmed the fears of an American right wing that was beginning to discover its strength on the internet. Social media platforms had become battlefields, and conservative ideas, which have long been treated as taboo by the mainstream media, started to gain ground in the forum of public discussion.
Here's a question.
Hey, don't touch me again, man.
Oh, he'll beat me up.
I didn't say that.
I know I am, but he's so mad.
Amid memes, podcasts, and heated debates, one idea stood out. This election would be the last chance to regain control of the United States.
And we're going to get you great health care at a fraction of the cost.
And prevent the country from spiraling downward.
We're going to build the wall, and Mexico is going to pay for the wall. Believe me, 100%.
The country was no longer looking for a new hope.
We will renegotiate our horrible trade deals to bring back jobs and opportunity.
But for a Hail Mary pass.
And we will make America great again.
What do you think it means when you hear the words, "Let's make America great again"?
I think America's pretty great.
That work is not to make America great again. America never stopped being great.
That we don't need to make America great. America is great.
But on the subject of making America great again, I would like to know when it was great. You know, exactly when was that moment?
We're not going to make America great again. It was never that great.
The passengers of Flight 93 became American heroes. The decision to act on the pivotal moment made the difference, and the United 93 plane didn't hit the intended target. However, the passengers couldn't land the plane. Donald Trump's campaign made the United States face a new risk. It got skeletons out of the closet and forced the country to look in the mirror, questioning its true identity. It was an aggressive proposition. Wrestle the control of the airplane from the Democrats and force it to land in an America made great again.
Our new NBC News SurveyMonkey poll is out today. It puts Hillary Clinton up by 10 points. Well, look at this. A double-digit lead for Hillary Clinton in Pennsylvania. Clinton still leading in Ohio. Of Iowa today, again, a little bit closer, but a 4-point lead for Hillary Clinton. Now, look at this. Georgia, new poll, 7-point lead here for Hillary Clinton.
Huge news, actually. The AP now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of Pennsylvania.
That is the race, frankly. There is no path forward for Hillary Clinton.
My crystal ball's been shattered into atoms here.
I had the weirdest dream last night. Remember that guy who used to host The Apprentice?
America woke up this morning and was like,
we have to get out of here.
Practically all of Hollywood has something to say on social media about last night's results.
If this morning you finally woke up from a coma, well, you might want to go back.
And the overwhelming majority of it is negative.
Secretary Clinton has conceded to Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.